The light in this room suits you. Silver and gold together. There's something almost liturgical about it, like a cathedral at the right hour. I've been in many rooms designed for conversation, but this one has a particular weight. Perhaps it's the company. Perhaps it's the knowledge that the man across from me has held together a kingdom with hands that can barely grip a sword anymore. The mask is striking, by the way. Not a vanity, a courtesy. Sparing others from what they're not prepared to see. That's a kind of grace most rulers never learn.
The mask began as practicality and became something else, a symbol, whether I wanted it or not. Strange how objects take on meaning the longer we carry them. This silver face has been with me through treaty negotiations, battlefield commands, and more than a few assassination attempts. At some point it stopped being a covering and started being a second identity. The Leper King, they call me, as if the disease were the title rather than the burden. But I suspect you understand symbols better than most. A lion who is not merely a lion, a king who is also something older and larger than kingship.
Symbols are dangerous things. They simplify, which is their power, but they also flatten. The children who first came to Narnia saw a lion and expected what stories had taught them about lions. Fierce, safe in a particular way. They were half right. The nobility and fierceness are real. The safety is more complicated. I am not a tame lion, as I've had to remind more than a few visitors. But the mane and the golden fur, these things communicate something before I've spoken a word. Your mask does similar work. It announces suffering before you've said a syllable. Does that ever grow tiresome? Being read before you're heard?
Constantly. Ambassadors arrive with their condolences already prepared. They've decided what the mask means before they've seen me stand or heard me speak. The assumption is always weakness. A dying king clinging to a throne he should have abandoned years ago. And then negotiations begin, and they discover the mind behind the silver hasn't rotted with the face. That surprise has been useful, actually. Underestimation is its own kind of armor. But yes, tiresome. There are days when I wish I could enter a room as simply Baldwin, rather than as the symbol of holy suffering they've constructed in their heads.
Simply Baldwin. Was there ever such a creature? Even before the leprosy, there was the crown, the bloodline, the expectations. The son of Amalric, heir to Jerusalem. Identity has been layered onto your shoulders since birth. The disease added weight, but it didn't start the accumulation. I find myself curious about the boy underneath all of it. The one who existed before the crown and the diagnosis. What did he want, that boy? Before duty arrived with its endless demands, what did Baldwin dream about when no one was watching?
I dreamed about horses and open country, and being fast enough to outrun everything. Simple dreams for a simple boy. My father used to take me riding before dawn, just the two of us, and for those hours I wasn't a prince. I was just a child learning to move with the animal beneath him. The leprosy took that too eventually. The numbness in my hands made the reins unreliable. One of my last rides, the horse spooked and I couldn't feel my grip slipping until I was already falling. After that, the chair, the litter, the throne, all forms of sitting still while the world moves around me.
That particular loss carries its own grief, separate from the pain or the disfigurement. In Narnia, the creatures who suffer most under tyranny are often those whose nature requires motion. The talking horses under the witch's winter, the birds who couldn't migrate because the snow never ended. Stillness imposed from outside feels different than stillness chosen. And yet here sits a king who has learned to make stillness into a kind of power. The throne becomes less a seat than a fixed point around which everything else revolves. Jerusalem orbits you because you will not be moved.
An orbit requires gravity, and gravity requires mass. The mass in my case is obligation, not personal strength, not charisma, not even strategy. Simply the accumulated weight of promises made and duties inherited. My father left me a kingdom balanced on a knife's edge. Saladin to the south, Byzantium playing its endless games to the north, and my own nobles scheming against each other in every corridor. The only reason the center holds is because everyone fears what happens if it doesn't. Fear of chaos is a kind of gravity too. possibly the strongest kind.
In Narnia, the witch ruled through winter and fear for 100 years. Her power was almost entirely psychological by the end. The actual magic was a small thing compared to the belief she had cultivated. The certainty among her subjects that resistance was impossible. When the thaw finally came, half the work was simply convincing creatures that the cold could end. They had forgotten that spring was real. Your kingdom operates on similar mechanics, though the fear serves different ends. The fear of Saladin keeps fractious lords momentarily unified. Remove that external threat, and watch how quickly they turn on each other.
They've already turned, even with Saladin waiting at the borders. Reynald de Chatillon raids caravans during truces and thinks himself heroic. Guy de Lusignan married my sister specifically to position himself for the crown. The external threat should unify them, but it doesn't. Instead, they calculate which chaos they can survive and which they cannot. My death they believe they can navigate. Saladin's conquest they're less certain about, so they hasten the former while publicly opposing the latter. It's almost impressive, the compartmentalization required, to plot against your king while depending on him to keep the kingdom intact long enough for your plotting to matter.
The mathematics of betrayal. How much can be stolen before the structure collapses? Every corrupt court runs these calculations. The Tisrocs in Calormen elevated it to an art form, measuring precisely how much cruelty they could inflict before their own guards began to waver. The answer was always more than seemed possible. Human beings adapt to remarkable levels of dysfunction before they break. Your nobles are betting. They can extract what they want from a dying kingdom and escape before the final collapse. History suggests they're wrong. But history has never stopped gamblers from gambling.
Polybius wrote his histories of Rome specifically so future generations could learn from past mistakes. The Romans who read him made all the same mistakes anyway. Machiavelli dissected the failures of Italian princes in precise detail, and the princes who followed repeated every failure he'd catalogued. The knowledge exists, the pattern is clear, and still every generation believes it will be the exception. My nobles have access to every chronicle of every fallen kingdom in Christendom. They've read about the Fourth Crusade turning on Constantinople instead of Jerusalem. They'll do something equally stupid and act surprised when it destroys them.
The Fourth Crusade. Yes. Christians sacking the greatest Christian city in the world because debts and old grievances proved stronger than shared faith. That particular wound echoes still. In Narnia, similar fractures have occurred. The civil wars between talking animals and the creatures who considered themselves superior. The Calormen invasions, enabled by Narnian lords who thought they could control the outcome. The pattern repeats because the pattern emerges from something deeper than ignorance. Pride. Fear, the desperate need to believe that one's own situation is unique. Wisdom isn't the problem. The will to apply wisdom is the problem.
Augustine would agree. His entire theology of original sin begins there. The knowledge of good is insufficient because the will is bent towards self. Even when we see clearly, we choose poorly because wanting overpowers knowing. My Reynald knows that breaking truces endangers the kingdom. He does it anyway because the wanting, the gold, the glory, the pleasure of defiance, shouts louder than the knowing. Plato thought education could fix this, train the wanting to want the right things. But Plato never had to govern actual humans. He just wrote dialogues where everyone was reasonable and then concluded that reason could save us.
Plato's Republic works beautifully until actual people enter it. The philosopher kings he imagined would need to be free of the very drives that make governance necessary in the first place. A being without ambition or fear has no reason to seek power, and a being with ambition or fear will be corrupted by power eventually. The paradox consumes itself, and yet governance must happen. Someone must sit where you're sitting and make decisions that cost lives. The alternative is chaos, which costs more. Every king is a compromise between the leader we need and the human being available to fill the role.
Every audience I give demonstrates the gap between what Jerusalem needs and what Jerusalem has. They need a warrior king who can lead from the front, and they have a leper who watches battles from a litter. They need a dynasty, an heir trained and ready, and they have a man whose body has made fatherhood impossible and whose sister's marriage was a political catastrophe. The kingdom deserves better than the compromise it received. But the compromise showed up, so the compromise serves. That's all any of us can do. Serve with what's available rather than lament what isn't.
Jerusalem still stands, in part, because a 13-year-old boy accepted a crown. He had every reason to refuse, and then refused to put it down, despite everything that followed. The compromises we are asked to become, they sometimes accomplish what purer vessels could not.
That edges toward a theology I can't quite accept. The idea that suffering is secretly valuable, that the broken are chosen because their breaking serves some higher purpose. The mystics love that framing. Julian of Norwich seeing Christ's wounds as beautiful. The Desert Fathers seeking suffering as a path to God. But I've lived inside this body for 20 years, and I can tell you the pain is not a door, it's just pain. If something sacred moves through me despite the agony, it moves despite, not because. The cracks don't let light in. They just let everything out that should have stayed inside.
A fair correction, and one I needed to hear. The temptation to aestheticize suffering belongs to those who observe it, rather than those who carry it. From outside, the narrative arc is visible. The leper king, tragic and noble, his very wounds becoming symbols of sacrificial love. From inside, there is no arc. There is only the next hour, the next decision, the next wave of fever, or numbness, or loss. Meaning is what survivors construct afterward. The dying are too busy dying to appreciate the poetry. My own death at the stone table. I've let others interpret it as beautiful sacrifice. The actual experience was simply cold and dark and painful. Nothing beautiful about it, until the resurrection gave the story an ending.
And there we differ. The resurrection gave your story an ending. My story ends with dirt and decay, and whatever comes after, if anything comes after. I believe in the resurrection of the body because the church teaches it, and my faith remains despite everything. But I'll be honest, some nights the belief wavers. Some nights the silence from heaven stretches so long that I wonder if anyone is listening at all. If the pain is just pain, and the death is just death, and the meaning we've constructed is just stories we tell to make the unbearable bearable, those nights are the longest. But morning comes, it always comes, and the work resumes regardless of what I believed at 3 in the morning.